We are going to start the David Douglas School Board meeting for November 18th, 2021 at 7:03 p.m. And we'll start with a call to order. It's our Native American land acknowledgement. Today I would like to acknowledge the people whose land we are gathered on. Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin Kalyapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Let us also acknowledge the robust Native community made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country and whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking opportunities. Today, these same communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. And we're going to start today with Komar. We'll administer the oath of office to Gabriela Saldana Lopez.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Gabriela Saldana Lopez, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Oregon, and the laws thereof, and the policies of the David Douglas School District. During my term, I will faithfully and impartially discharge the responsibilities of the office of school board member to the best of my ability. Welcome.
Thank you. Congratulations, Gabriela. We're very excited to have you join us on the board. All right, we have our amazing school board or student body president, Aspen Pierce, in person, the volleyball star herself. Welcome. Love to hear your student body report.
Okay, I have a lot of good feelings, good news, lots of community service we're doing. So I'll start with the underclassmen. They're working on an equity design, and they're paired up with Google. They have a partner with Google. And what they do is they're going through our school and finding systems that students feel aren't equitable towards them. They've interviewed various students, various staff. I actually have their mission statement right here. It is, how might we encourage and amplify student voices so they can be heard and understood on an administrative level? So basically, they're just seeing if there's any faults within our systems at our school, and they're looking on how to fix them, what we can do. And the design challenge actually brought us a Black Studies class and a Latino Studies class. So there's change that's happened, and I'm excited to see what they come up with for this year. So that's what the underclassmen are focusing on. And now upperclassmen, we're doing a lot of community service. We have 2 right now. Obviously, we have our Scots Angels. If you guys don't know what that is, we have a kid kind of in our community. His name's Sammy. He's 6 years old, and he is diagnosed with leukemia. And we are fundraising a whole bunch of money to help his family with medications and treatments and things like that. He has been going through treatment for about a year now. So we have a bunch of fundraisers. Some ideas we have are a movie night, a Miracle Minute, of course. We have raffles where we get prizes and people buy tickets. Our biggest goal is just to raise as much money as possible for their family. That's going to start very soon. We're going to focus on Winter Week with all of our fundraising and stuff. And then we have Communicare, and this is specifically to Student Council. But that is, we are working with the Communicare Foundation, and what we do is we create a mission statement, and then we look for nonprofits within our community who work towards our mission statement, and we grant them a bunch of money. So we're automatically given $7,500, and our goal is to raise $750, and that will be matched by 10. So if we reach that 750 goal, then we're going to get $15,000 to give out to these nonprofits. And I have our mission statement as well. It's a little bit longer, so bear with me. It says, we, the students of David Douglas High School, in partnership with Communicare, will be granting money to organizations providing reintegration services for those experiencing homelessness in Multnomah County. To break the cycle of homelessness, we must approach the root of the problem, temporary solutions. We will focus on organizations that provide job placement services, financial literacy programs, and addiction support to our homeless community. Basically, we just want to try to end the cycle of homelessness because we understand that once you are homeless, it's really hard to get out of that. So we're working with organizations. Last year, we worked with domestic violence, and this year we're working with reintegration services. So that's all I have for us right now.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Are there any comments or feedback from the board? I just have to say for myself, I'm so impressed with everything y'all are doing. Just your leadership is incredible, and the issues you're trying to address, the folks that you're trying to help, and the systems that you're looking to change. It's really inspiring. So thank you.
Just a question. Thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. It's fantastic. I just wondered, how are the children or families selected for Scots Angels?
Yeah, so we reach out to hospitals in our community, and Dornbecker, they're the ones who recommended Sammy to us because he is near our community. I believe he's in the around Clackamas area. So he was recommended to us, and then we learn about his story, and then we decide to pick him.
Thank you. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, or if you have other things you need to do. Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
One last question. So you said that you're going to start looking for donations in Winter Week. When is that exactly, and how can people get informed?
Yeah, so Winter Week, let me look at my calendar. I don't know the dates exactly. It's the week before winter break. So basically that week we do a whole bunch of school stuff. We do spirit weeks. We usually have therapy llamas or therapy dogs. We'll do welcome Wednesdays in the morning, have candy cane, stuff like that. It's just our festive week to kick off the holiday season. So we're going to do, we do have, this is an addition to this year, we are able to take credit card and debit card contributions. That is something new, and we're really excited for that. We think that can bring in more money. But yeah, that'll start, it's the second week of December.
Okay, great. Thank you. You can stay, or if you need to go, that's fine too. We always love to have you here, though. It's good to see you again. Okay, so we now have public comment, and I believe we have one person signed up. Is that correct? Okay, so we will have Amran Goni, who's a district parent, present, and this will be through our district interpreter, Shamsa Dire. Shamsa Dire. We can't hear you yet. Bear with us a moment. 1 minute. I believe we can hear you now. Very low. Oh yeah, you can put the 1 minute.
Yeah, you want to try again? We can hear you. We're just trying to turn you up a little bit.
Okay. Can you guys hear me fine now?
Yes. Amran Goni, you may go through Shamsa.
Shamsa, you can go ahead.
Hi everyone. I have a parent here. Her name is Amran Ghani. She wants to make a parent testimony here today. I'll let her speak for the whole 3 minutes, and then I'll interpret everything she says. Unmute iska dhigi kartaa, waa hadli kartaa.
Waan salaamayaa qof kasta oo meeshan ku jiro. Ani waxaan ahay ilmo badan oo David Douglas ii dhigteen. Laba way ii garaajuugooyeen, wiil ii gabar. Labana hadda ii dhigtaan. Marka waalidiinta ku xiranayaan districtka David Douglas waxaan ka hadlayaa 3 minutes-kan hadda la isiiyey oo aad ugu kululaaday. Ilmaha marka qof coronavirus qabaan la kontakta gareeyaan oo iskuulka soo siiyo guriga aada la dhaho intii cunugaas ka soo kabsanaa in loo galiyo ma aha habsan. Mid waa midaas. Mid kaloo labaad oo ka hadlayo waxaa waaye ilmaha yaryarka ah oo meesha joogaan muslimka ah in la siiyo holidayaashooda sida ilmaha kaleeto loo siinaayo Thanksgiving-ka ama holidayaasha oo igidahooda sida kuweenana loo siiyo iyo habsan loo galinin ilmaha. Talabaad oo kale waxaan ka hadlayaa ilmaha Soomaalida ah inaad naga dhigtaan waalidiin ilmahooda ka hadli karaan ama ilmaha dhibkooda meesha ka haysta ka hadli karo. Assalaamu calaykum.
First and foremost, I want to greet everyone that's here today. I have 2 students that go to Douglas as of right now, and I already have 2 kids that have graduated. I am a district parent that's very involved within the school. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is coronavirus. When a student gets the call, the parent gets the call where it says, oh, your student has been contacted by another student that had the virus. There shouldn't be an absence as what happened to our kids. Both of our students were sent home to quarantine for 10 days. And they called her and said, hey, your kids have been absent for 10 days. And that shouldn't happen. If the school sends kids home for quarantine, it should be an excused absence. Another thing she wants to bring to your attention is she's speaking on behalf of all Muslim kids, all parents that have Muslim kids. There shouldn't be, they observe one holiday throughout the whole year. And that holiday is called Eid. It's after Ramadan when students fast. Ramadan is they don't have to observe it at school. They don't have to stay at home. They kind of do everything at school and at home. So there shouldn't be a reason for them to be excused. But Eid is a holiday that happens once every year, and it's very important to the Muslim students for them to stay at home and celebrate that day with their families. Just like Christmas and Thanksgiving is very important to other families. But the district has Eid as an excused absence. So if a student misses school due to that holiday, they'll have an excused absence. And she wants to kind of bring that to the district's attention because she wants kids to go to school, but also this is a holiday that happens once a year. And this is a holiday that students should celebrate with their families, with their parents. And if they have to wake up by 6 a.m. to go to prayer on that day and come back home by who knows what time, because there's a lot of things that happen within the holiday, just like Christmas. Christmas has 2 weeks where students have a break, but she's asking for just 1 day where students can have an excused absence, which is just 1 day. According to Christmas, which is 2 weeks, students will only miss 1 day of school. So thank you guys very much for listening to her.
Assalamu alaikum. Very important testimony. I will say that we don't respond during board meetings to testimony, but as somebody who I am Muslim myself, I would love to direct the superintendent to consider the testimony tonight and come to leadership with some ideas on this. We also superintendent respond to in coordination with our leadership. So thank you very much.
iyada oo iidana naagtan naag muslim waaye maxay dhahdee waan ku maqlay waxaad haysid haddana maxay u celin doontaa macalinka oo superintendentka kan oo maamula iskuulyaasha dhan soo asagaa hadli doonaa.
Thank you.
waa ku mahadsantahay dhe because ilmaha waxaa waaye dhe in ma aha dhe in la baro iskuulka kale ilmahana inay diinta bartaan si daraakiska iyo waxyaalahaas ay uga leexdaan oo lagu ababiyo dhe diintooda. marka waxaan rabnaa dhe haddaan waalid aan nahay ani communityna kama socdi meelna kama socdi occupationna kama socdi ilmahayga 8 ciyaalaan leeyahay aan ka socdaa aanan ahayeen oo ahay ilmaha kaleetoo dhibaataysan waa arkaa dheh because hooyaa ahay ilmahayga saa uga xanuunsanaya ilmaha kaleetana uga xanuunsanaya marka waxaan jeclahay dhe mar kastaba inaa ilmaha aan dhagaysto ama dictationkooda aan siiyo marka waxaan rabnaa inaa ininkana macalimiin ahaan ama district ahaan aan isla wada shaqeyno oo midnimada aan noo badisay maadaama corona joogo isu midinka camal aan noo sameyn kartin oo waalid hataan aan ka danqanayno ilmaha.
So she said, as a mother that has 8 kids, I'm speaking for all parents. Religion is the first priority for Muslim parents, and that's one thing that kind of keeps them away from going astray and having bad choices. So for them to have that day where they can observe their holiday is very important. It kind of shows them like a reward for them fasting for a whole month. And she also said she kind of needs more attention for the Somali students. She's seen a lot of, as a parent, she's seen a lot of students that are really struggling, and just from concerned family that she's seen around, they need a lot of help and a lot of communication between school and parents. And she's asking if there could be regular meetings where Somali parents can speak to like the superintendent or the board of education, somewhere where they could kind of have communication going to see what's going on with their kids. And the first priority is for school and for the school and parents to work together. And if parents are concerned and they have no communication and they have no bridge of communication for them to speak to the school, that's kind of difficult because then they don't know what their kids need, and if their kid have concerns, they don't know who to go to.
Thank you so much for your testimony tonight. Superintendent, I don't know if you have a comment or, and then we'll move on to our next agenda.
Yeah, I would just like to once again thank you for the comment, the testimony, and we will definitely, I'll follow up with explanations about attendance. And then also there is definitely a way that we can set up regular meetings, communications, and the voices of parents and students that are essential to our mission. So you will be hearing from me. We'll develop a partner, get connected as early as next week. At the latest, it will be the week after Thanksgiving, but I'm sure we'll at least be able to connect early next week.
Thank you.
So asaga oo muxuu yahaa superintendentska oo maamula iskuulyaasha dhan muxuu dhahay next week masana wiiga kale adi aan kula hadli doonaa isla kulmi doonaa aan waxaan aan kala hadli karnaa. waana mahadsantahaa maanta ila hadashay aanoo sheegtay waxaan dhan.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to our next agenda item. We have invited public input here today from Tara Williams, who I'm not sure if it's in person or online. Okay, so we'll get Tara in here, and this is regarding Native American Heritage Month, which we celebrate this month. So we'll just take a second to move folks over online, and would love to hear our invited testimony from Tara Williams.
Tara, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, are you ready? My name is Tara Williams, and I work as the counseling secretary and the girls wrestling coach at David Douglas High School. One of the things that is most important to me is my cultural identity, which is Kaikon Athabaskan and Inupiat. For those that aren't familiar with those two tribal affiliations, my people are from Central and Northern Alaska. Over the last 3 years that I've worked at David Douglas High School, first as an instructional assistant, then as the grad mentor, and now in my current position, I've had the pleasure of getting to know some of our Native identifying students and building up the trust to have honest conversations with them about how they feel about being Native students at David Douglas. When they do gather the courage and trust to talk real talk with me, the first thing that they all have said is that they've never met another Native student here, or maybe they've only met one. The next thing that they confide in me about their experience is that they feel incredibly disconnected from their family and their cultural identity, and that they'd like to learn more about their Native American heritage. According to the David Douglas School District, Native American students only make up for about 0.7% of our student population. While this number of Native identifying students is small, that just means that they have a higher need for connection, validation, understanding, and the experience of a culturally responsive educational environment. I'm proud to be a part of the movement in the district to include our Native students in this community and in the classroom, which includes the Native American Proclamation Team, where our group works together to put educational opportunities and resources together for teachers to use in their classrooms to educate students about Native American history, traditions, and how to engage in respectful conversations with Native Americans. I've also started an Indigenous Students Club at the high school where Native identifying students can come together, share their experiences and culture with other Native students, and celebrate what they should be very proud of. I would just like to stress how important it is to continue and even step up the work that we have to help to support our Native identifying students in this district and continue the hard work and passion that, that the people have put so much into. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or? If not, we're going to try something new. We're going to try something new as we read this proclamation tonight, because this isn't a proclamation by the board chair. This is a proclamation by all of us as leaders, as the entire board, and, you know, working with the cabinet and all of you, folks like you on the ground who are doing the work every day to honor Native Americans in this district. So we're going to read it collectively, and I'll start, and we'll move everywhere as this direction. Whereas Native American Indians are descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States, the first Americans, and
contribute to the unique identity of the Pacific Northwest, represented the early voices for the values that define our nation, and
whereas Native Americans, Indians maintain vibrant cultural heritage, rich traditions, and hold a deeply rooted sense of community, and
whereas there are 68 Native American Indian, Alaska Native students representing 59 tribes, bands from across the nation enrolled as students in the David Douglas District, and there are 817 students who self-identify as ethnically and/or racially Native American Alaskan Native students, and
whereas we cannot ignore nor erase the consequences of our country's long and unfortunate history of violence, discrimination, and deprivation of the Native Americans, but we can commit to working together for a bright future. And
whereas the district's Native American Parent Advisory Council continues its efforts to increase Native family engagement by forming strong relationships in a culturally appropriate way, and to provide feedback and guidance to district leaders on improving outcomes and providing opportunities for Native American youth in the district, and
whereas the district has an adopted equity policy that states our commitment to closing the achievement gap for Indigenous peoples and creating an educational environment where all students can benefit equally from the educational programs offered, and
whereas the district is working towards eliminating the racial predictability and disproportionality on all aspects of education and articulated action steps in the adopted district strategic plan and district equity plan, and
whereas the district earlier this year proclaimed every second Monday of October to be Indigenous Peoples Day as an opportunity to reflect upon the ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples of this land, to celebrate the thriving cultures and values of Indigenous peoples of our region, and to stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples elsewhere. And
now, therefore,
I, Stephanie Stevens, Chair of the David Douglas School Board of Directors, on behalf of us all, do hereby proclaim the month-long celebration of Native American Indian heritage in the David Douglas School District to occur in the month of November. Be it further resolved that the David Douglas School Board of Directors strongly encourages our staff and community to observe, recognize, and celebrate the culture, heritage, and contributions of Native Americans to our country, our state, our cities, and our schools. Thank you so much, Tara, for being here and for all the work you're doing to support our students. Our next agenda item is consent agenda. So would somebody like to move consent agenda?
I motion to move the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda. Can I get a second?
A second.
All right. Wah moves and Donna seconds. And we'll go ahead and start. Oh, any discussion? No? Okay. Director Barrow?
Aye.
Director Saldana Lopez?
Aye.
Director Barber?
Aye.
Director Stevens votes aye. And Director Wynn?
Aye.
All right, great. Thank you. And next on the agenda is the appointment of our budget committee person number 6. So each of our school board members has a budget committee member associated with their position, and position 6 is actually the position for Andrea Valderrama, who could not be here tonight, but she has asked that I appoint or I nominate somebody in her stead, and the person that she's requesting that I nominate in her stead is Lisa Chen. And I believe you've previously received all of the applicants to the budget committee, but this is the one that Director Valderrama would like to forward. So I move nomination. Any other nominees? Okay, I'll close nomination and we'll take a vote, but we only have one, so. But just to make it official, Director Barber.
Aye.
Director Saldana Lopez.
Aye.
Director Barber.
Aye.
Barrow Barber. Stevens votes aye, and Wynn.
Aye.
All right. All right, so now is a very exciting update. The cabinet will present something that Donna and I requested on the agenda, which is where are we with the equity plan and strategic plan? So we're going to get a report from cabinet on our equity plan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Director Stevens, or Board Chair Stevens, I should say. Yeah, so we're very excited to share some of our work, and as we've rolled out this year, diving into our strategic plan and our equity plan, and kind of share where we've been and, more importantly, where we're going, kind of the work that we've started and kicked off. With that said, I get the privilege to start this evening with a few slides, and we do have a number of individuals that are presenting here. Tay's probably the through line. We'll probably stay here the whole time, but when I'm done with a few slides, I'll probably move, and we'll be as seamless as possible, but just so you know, there'll be people coming and going. And if we go to the next, so specifically, a reminder to the board, we have some new board members, but last year we had the opportunity and privilege to connect with, work with, listen to our community, our stakeholders, and ultimately develop a strategic plan that our board adopted and moved forward. So we're just so excited and thankful for our entire community to help guide this work. And we know it's going to be driving our district into the future. So this work included district working hand in hand with our community and employees to develop a plan that supports continuous improvement for our students. So again, we already celebrated this. We're so excited about it. And as Board Chair Stevens shared that her and Vice Chair Barber said, hey, where are we with this? We don't want this to be just a piece of paper living on a shelf or a 3-ring notebook. We want this to be real work within our district. So can we have continued feedback and continued updates of where we're at? So we'll jump to the next slide. So this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about strategic plan, not a lot, and I'll explain that in a second. Then we're going to dive into our equity plan. Finally, we're going to look at our current focus, a lot of the work, and then lastly, we'll get to questions and hopefully some discussion and feedback. So we went to the next slide like that. So just a real quick update. Cut me off. We do have 28 slides and we only have about 20 minutes, so we got to do something. No, seriously. Just a quick update and heads up community. Each year I get the privilege of working with my leadership team in cabinet, and we establish goals around student achievement, maybe initiatives. And we know this year, Care and Connect, and as we transition back, there was a lot of goals just in reopening. Let's call it that. Let's call it reopening, and the first time we've done it in this format. So there was a lot related to that. But I also had the privilege of sitting down working with each of my cabinet members, team leaders, to basically talk about a strategic plan, start setting goals, and really say, you know what our goals are this year? You know what our goals are next year? Goals are the year after? Is our strategic plan and our equity plan. So, I mean, it's great because it provides a direct focus, and then we're getting the opportunity to discuss as a cabinet team as well, and then that cascades down to our principals, and that cascades down to our classroom. So the work as it rolls out, we've initiated. I just wanted to share that we have started that. I've met with every single cabinet member, and we've started to meet with our administrators as well. So diving into the next slide. Just a quick reminder, and then we'll move on to really the little more meat. But our strategic plan, guiding principles and focus areas. If you forgot, we have it posted in my office and other directors in the office. But guiding principles, ensuring safety and wellness, cultivating connections and relationships, center on equity. I'm just going to say that again: center on equity, innovate, and then focus areas: diversity, equity, and inclusion, communication and family engagement, health and well-being, and highly effective curriculum. The reason that I focused on centered on equity, and you'll see under the focus area, the very first bullet there is diversity, equity, and inclusion, is because that's where we started our work. When we looked at our strategic plan and looked at some of the to-dos, if you will, we're on track, and a lot of those really start more in the spring as far as when we're reporting, getting things done. But where we've started this year, kicking off through Tay's leadership and many of our directors and administrators and staff, to be quite honest, is our equity work and some of the specific guidance direction of the equity plan, and that's what we're going to focus on mostly this evening. So as we dive into a little bit of a overview of the equity plan, and then we're going to dive into our work, I'm going to turn it over to Tay.
Thank you, Ken. In front of you, you should have a feedback loop graphic organizer created by our own Kelly Devlin. Please use that for today's presentation in case you have any questions or feedback that you would like to ask at the end. Yes, Stephanie, that is correct. So for over a year, while enduring a global pandemic, the members of our Racial Equity Committee preserved to meet the mission set forth on behalf of the students, families, and community of the David Douglas School District. Based on the collective input and feedback from the various stakeholders, the presented David Douglas Racial Equity Plan was built on the following commitments. Next slide, please. And I know that Ken went over these, but now we really get to go deep with this. So the 4 commitments are student achievement, student discipline, student systems accountability, and workplace policy. And I know that we also have following freedom dreams that align with this work. Can I have the next slide, please? First freedom dream we have here is we want the district to adopt a culturally responsive curriculum that affirms the identity of Black and Brown students. Later on in the presentation, you will hear from Brooke, and she's going to go a little bit deeper with what that actually looks like in our district. Next slide. We want the district to rethink, reimagine, and reconstruct our professional development systems to provide high-quality training on equity and culturally responsive practices for all licensed and classified staff. One of the things that I'll elaborate on a little bit later is that each of our buildings currently have an equity team, and that was one of the acts from our second Freedom Dream. And we also have building-wide equity plans from about 90% of our schools at this time. Some of you have been invited to participate in those conversations with our equity teams, and I hope that you've been able to participate. Next slide, please. Freedom Dream 3. We want to build a district culture that is unapologetic about hiring staff of color to increase representation of our student population. And I know that Kelly's going to go a little bit deeper into that demand later on in the presentation. I would also like to announce that a Grow Your Own program, we have our first graduate coming December 16th.
Okay, huge celebration. So I get the pleasure of talking to you about student achievement. As that's defined in our plan, it's our commitment to narrowing the gap between our highest and lowest achieving students by increasing opportunities for all students, while focusing on raising the achievement of our lowest performing students. And tonight we're going to give you an update on that first bullet and the last bullet, particularly what is happening within our language arts curriculum adoption. So next slide, please. So we know high quality materials matter, and high quality materials that affirm the identities of our Black and Brown students matter even more. And you can see the work of choosing high quality curriculum spans across all of our plans, our strategic plan, our Freedom Dream #1, and our equity plan. Next slide, please. So what we've done, I'm super excited to share where we are thus far in this process. So first of all, we have partnered with the staff of Color Group, and we have 2 members that have been on our planning team, which has been really exciting. We really wanted to lead with equity from the beginning. And we always do an application process for teachers that want to join this work. This is a little bit of a sample of our middle and high school application. And if you can read that tiny print on the top there, really wanting teachers to know that this was going to be our charge, that we are charged with adopting a high quality curriculum that leads with equity. And we had so many teachers excited to engage in this work. As part of the application, you can see that question at the bottom there. How does an equity mindset inform your decision around curriculum and instruction practices? So we have a very robust team. Our elementary application looks just the same. We provided the application to our staff of Color Group a week early before we opened it up to all staff, just so that they would have the first opportunities to be a part of the team. Next slide, please. So up until now, we've been doing a lot of professional learning. We are just now getting to the point where we're starting to look at materials, but we pulled the team together in the spring. And then this summer, we read Cultivating Genius. It's an equity framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy. We also engaged in the opportunity myth, what students can show us about how school is letting them down and how to fix it. So we had very robust conversations about what this means for our adoption and what are our aspirations as we go to choose materials for students. This past October, we came together and we had a workshop style for our team. And I'm really excited. The first workshop was anti-racist, anti-bias training. Let's talk about race. That was led by 2 of our staff of Color Group, our equity specialists, who I know Tay's going to talk about a little bit later, and one of our 4th grade teachers from Earl Boyles. This also supports Freedom Dream #3, I believe. We have supported the staff of Color Group in coming together, and we've compensated with over 15 hours of extra duty pay to put together training for staff. And I can say this training was phenomenal. It's something that all of our administrators are taking part of, a lot of our teachers. It was so very well received and very moving and powerful. We also learned about Oregon Department of Education and their curriculum adoption process, and very exciting to know that Oregon is one of the only states that has equity and cultural representation as part of their adoption criteria. Sad that we're one of the only states, exciting that our state has that. But we really needed to learn about the state process to understand, because that is the first layer of the materials that we review. And of course, we needed to learn about the science of reading, because that is what we are adopting, reading materials. And then we engaged in data analysis, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, just to determine our adoption priorities. So next slide, please. So part of that, I'm not going to go into every piece of data that we analyzed, but I think a very exciting part is really engaging student voice from the onset. So we engaged in what are called empathy interviews. And these are one-on-one conversations that use open-ended questions to elicit stories about specific experiences our students are having, in their language arts classrooms that help uncover unacknowledged needs. So we have interviewed one-on-one over 50 students, third grade all the way through high school. We had team members volunteer to do that work, and they were very exciting. They said it was some of the most powerful conversations they've had, and that students were so excited that you listen to me, you want to know what I think about choosing materials. And so as a curriculum team, we came together, we coded all of their responses and came up with 6 themes that would drive our work. And you could see those themes that students want content that connect to their current times and issues they face in their lives. They want to learn more deeply about their own and other cultures. They want lessons and books that represent multiple perspectives and identities. They want assignments and experience with peers are valued by some students. Oh, interactive. Students want choice in what they learn, read, and write about, and they want multiple ways to learn and show what they learn. And they value space for creativity. So all of this has been work, and just now, we're getting to the point where we're starting to dig into materials, and in December, we're going to have publisher presentations. You will see, hopefully by the next meeting, you will get to see some of those materials lining our walls. So that is where we are right now with our language arts adoption and really leading with equity. And Mary's going to talk to you about some professional learning series we're going through.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, so we are in the second year of exploring professional learning around universal design for learning. And what universal design for learning, we call UDL, does for us is it helps us really think about removing barriers to instruction at the design phase. So creating instructional strategies that allow us to offer students multiple ways of entering the instructions, so multiple ways of showing what they know and understand in the instruction, and multiple ways to be engaged. So we are in the second year, as I said. So we're in the, we actually just finished session 2 today with Andretisha Fitzgerald, and then we'll be moving into the last 2 sessions around UDL in a multi-tiered system of support framework, so how that fits into all of our other interventions and strategies in a classroom, and then, or actually in a whole building wide. And then the last section is really focusing on the classroom and instruction there.
Thank you, Mary. Before you now, these are some of our commitments that we have outlined within our equity plan, and I would say actually they are action steps. So there was an ask for an additional, for one racial equity TOSA, and that is Vanessa Crawley. She is with us now, working alongside Kelly and myself. In addition, we asked for professional learning training on anti-racist and anti-bias lens, and we have that in place. Culturally responsive practice have been identified in each of our buildings, and those are basically called our CRTs. So if you have attended one of our equity school meetings, you will hear staff talk about CRTs. We have asked that there are 2 CRTs identified this year and implemented in the building. Lastly, we added on our vector equity trainings for all of our admin and certified staff. In addition, there are some classified staff who have completed this. There are 3 different courses: communication for inclusion, engagement with diversity, and lastly, the influence of bias and anti-bias training. So there were 3 completed in our vector training. And vector may already sound familiar to you because that is also how we do our safe school trainings.
And the second area of focus in our equity plan is around student discipline. And this was a very intentional selection because we do have disproportionate discipline in our district, particularly with our African American population. Within that, we have 3 key performance indicators. One is to complete all of the components of our 5-year federal grant on school climate transformation. The second one is to consistently look at student data and review it as administrators and at the building level. But then the most important probably is the last one, is to use that data to actually do course correction and respond when we don't see that our actions are actually having an impact. Next slide, please. So here is the update regarding those indicators. We are in the 3rd year of our federal grant. We are pretty much on target. There were a few things that were postponed due to COVID, mainly that we are really struggling with the fact that we can't have subs and we can't actually take teachers out of classrooms right now. But we have completed the initial training at the 3 middle schools. And just so that you understand around restorative practices, there's really a couple of tiers to that. There's what happens in the classroom between teachers and students. And then there is a whole nother level of professional learning for administrators on how to respond in a restorative way. So the program that we are using is very grounded in building relationships and then obviously restoring those relationships when things are kind of falling apart. So by the end of this year, we will have to train all of our elementary schools. I would say this fall, Menlo did go through the initial teacher training. And then all of our administrators will be trained on the administrative level by the end of this school year. So most of those things will happen after school is out or in the fall. And then the second part of that work in the grant is mindfulness training that we've been doing for the last 3 years as well. And we are on track for that. We have 3 cohorts for our elementary, and you can see that our 3rd cohort is in their 1st year right now. So after this year, all of our elementary programs will have had the initial mindfulness training, which really focuses on, and it's a social emotional learning for the adult staff. And then the last part is just around social emotional curriculum for K-12, and we have met this goal. We do have curriculum at all grade levels that have been adopted for social emotional learning. Next slide, please. And then our next steps around this section, where we are just beginning to look at student data. Again, last year we did not have great data around school discipline because we were in CDL. And so we're kind of starting now to figure out which data we're going to really be pulling. And we will be reviewing that monthly as a cabinet. And then our administrators will also be reviewing that quarterly. And then obviously the next step is then just that course correction. So looking at the data and having that drive how we change our interventions over time.
Thank you, Mary. Next we have Andy.
Thanks for keeping it warm. Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. It's really good to see everyone. I think it's really fun to talk about the accountability piece because all this work that you've all heard about matters even more when we can get students to graduate. And so you see there the David Douglas School District commits to ensure all students graduate from the David Douglas School District ready to succeed in a racially and culturally diverse local, national, and global community. So I won't read all of the things, the bullet points that you see there, and many of you have seen this before, but I would invite you to kind of highlight that 4th bullet down around the equity lens that we have, and I'll update with you in a moment. It's also exciting for me to sit and see Aspen, who's getting ready to graduate, and it's fun to think about you and hearing about you going into hopefully being successful, which I know that you will be. So this work is for you, my friend. Okay, can we get to the next slide? Okay, thank you. So A couple of things. This did not get updated. Okay. I have my own notes, but I thought I'd change that. So you're going to see my notes there that are jumbled around that actually were nicer in another format. We do have an equity lens, as I mentioned, that we used, and one example of that, which was really great, is that we had some schools that were looking at adapting part of our dress code, allowing hats and hoods into the building, and the equity lens was used through that, which was, I thought, kind of a breakthrough, actually. It was really great. When we think about commitment to disaggregate data, we are not here on the accountability piece yet where we want to be. Keyword there is yet. But we are trying to put data in, just lead with data as much as we can. And that's been a goal for us so we can measure improvement or lack thereof. So one of the ways that we do that is with our graduation data, and many of you have seen that before. We can disaggregate that in many different ways. Another way that we're looking at disaggregating data is what we call our Kpi data. And that stands for Key Performance Indicator. So basically that data tells us who is off track or on track to graduate. And we had a system of that as low as third grade. We've never really disaggregated that very deeply other than, I would say, grade level and math or reading or attendance or whatever. So we're in conversations about how to look at that at the student group level, which I think is super exciting, could tell us a lot. We do that with our Youth Truth data, and Youth Truth is a survey that we give to families and students every year. And so that is data that we are looking forward to looking at in a different way than we have before. We're fortunate that Youth Truth already provides that data that way for us. So we're looking forward to that. That survey's coming at the end of this month and through December. And then, so those are some updates there on the accountability in terms of data. And then Mary is going to come up and talk to us a little bit about what these coordinated care teams are in the building.
So the coordinated care teams were on our strategic plan, they were the only action item we had this fall. So we wanted to give you an update on those. If you remember, the purpose of the coordinated care team was to really set up a system that looks at like early indicators of students that might need help. So students that are having suddenly a change in attendance or grades, or suddenly experiencing homelessness, something like that. That this is a team that is made up of individuals from the school, but also from our community that can really try to wrap around. The idea is to create almost like a school wrap team that connects our families that are in the most need with resources that they need, whether in the community or within the building. So our action item for the strategic plan was to get these up and running. So at our fall, admin academy, we did some professional learning for our building administrators on what the expectations and the required membership was for the coordinated care team. And so we're now, we do, every building has one. And what we're setting up now is what is the data that we're going to be looking at. So we will be tracking students that are served through the team. We will be tracking any outcomes related to that, like increased grades or decreased discipline, what resources were provided, and I think that was it. So that's the coordinated care team. We're on target for that, and we will be collecting that data, and we'll be able to report that back out to you.
Thank you, Mary. Now we will be joined by Kelly Devlin.
Good evening, everyone. So the final commitment that we have in our equity policy is entitled Workplace Policies. While it centers on developing and striving for a workforce that is racially diverse and culturally responsive in all employee groups, one of those focus areas. The other focus area is related to professional development and supporting resources. I'd like to note that this is in direct tandem with Freedom Dream 2 and Freedom Dream 3. So next slide. Our update for this evening, based on the racially diverse workforce, at last month's school board meeting, you heard from Assistant Superintendent Candy Wallace on our annual hiring update, and also the work that has been happening over the course of the past year, even through COVID. We have been working, myself, Tay, Candy, our human resource manager, Darcy Powers, alongside a team from Freedom Dream 3. And we have been working on looking at our strategic hiring plan. We've had work group meetings even in the summer. We've been looking thoroughly through the document, and our plan is to ensure that when our targeted hiring season comes up in 2022, that we will be retraining our admin staff before that hiring season comes around. So that work is ongoing. It's not completed yet, and we will give you updates along the way. The other focus area under workforce policies is based on professional development and support resources. So what you will see here is a review of what Tay talked to you about earlier with the vector training. I do want to note that the 3 additional joins 2 existing trainings that were already on board for our safe schools. Cultural competence and racial bias was already there, and discrimination, avoiding discriminatory practices, has already been in our safe school trainings. We talked about our school board or school-based equity teams. We have them at our department levels as well, and the plans that have been coming in to Vanessa, Tay, and myself over the last couple of weeks have been focusing on academics, behavior, and those culturally responsive teaching practices. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight that didn't make it to this slide, but I felt that it was necessary for the board to hear, is that there have been some strategic equity investments that have been made during our budgeting process. That is in direct relation to family engagement from our strategic plan. And now I have to put on my readers because I can't see. And it totally connects to our workforce and support resources. So some of the investments that you approved and made alongside our equity TOSA, we just completed the hiring of 2 family engagement specialists that will start next week. No, the Monday after Thanksgiving holiday. IDA just completed 2 hires. So we're looking to onboard 2 new family engagement specialists. Both are BIPOC, and one of them is bilingual. And then the other one I wanted to reiterate was Shamsa, who you met tonight during the public testimony. She's a recent spring hire and a David Douglas graduate. And she is our district Somali liaison. And just to let you know, since tonight her role was to interpret, with Ide and Shamsa, they have already started family cafes for our Somali community. The first one happened in November, and there are 2 more already planned when we come back in 2020. So the plan is to have those either monthly or every other month with our Somali community. So those are the strategic investments that you all have made.
Thank you, Kel. Kel, where are you going? Stay with me. So lastly, I just wanted to close with the quote that I really enjoy. The knowledge and skills to educate all children already exist. There are no pedagogically barriers to teaching and learning when willing people are prepared and made available to children. So I just want to reiterate, I do believe that this work is attainable. We have already started. And I believe that we must lead with a growth mindset. I am happy to be a part of Cabinet with all the beautiful work that is going on, our building principals, our teachers, everyone. I would additionally say that this work is not just happening with our buildings, but also within our departments. We just did a training with our nutrition staff and also with transportation. Thank you again. And lastly, we are going to open up for questions, and I'm going to put Ken back in the hot seat. We're out of here, Kel.
Yeah, so again, snapshot update, some of the strategic investments, some of the strategic work, and you can see that I'm very proud of the team and the work we're doing. It's at the beginning of this year and everything we're going through. We aren't just tabling and shuffling things aside. One of the things that Stephanie and Donna brought up specifically, and next board agenda meeting I plan to bring, is thinking about what are the regular reports. So this is the first report, this is the kickoff, here's where we're at, but there's a lot more. There's different documents we'll be able to share that shows the strategic plan broken down into action items and where we're at on all those. So do we do this 4 times a year? Do we do it 3 times a year? Do we do it twice a year? But kind of thinking about when we do these reports and updates, 1, and then 2, subsets of that is thinking about data review, because part of the equity plan and the strategic plan is not just as it was shared, our cabinet admin and looking at data, making decisions, thinking about an equity lens, but also sharing that with the board. This is what the data is telling us. This is where it's great. And look, we have these trainings, we can see a difference. Or this is where it's not so good. So, equity work is outcome-based. We got to understand what those outcomes are so we can turn the dial ultimately. But we do want to answer questions. Actually, last thing I want to throw up, because it's so funny, because we were talking about it before when we had the workshop scheduled and we were trying to figure out if we were going to have a workshop or not. As a cabinet team, we were thinking, this will be great because we really can do it less in a presentation format and more of an interactive work format, and stickies and rolling up the sleeves and questions and conversations. And to be quite honest, we're all teachers at heart, so we're passionate about that. But what's funny about it, as we were talking about, well, maybe not this, and we're going to do the presentation, both Stephanie and Donna said, wouldn't it be great if we did more of an interactive process? And so I really like that we're thinking the same way, because I think as we go forward, there are other workshops where what we just did in a 20-minute time frame we had on these slides, we could take an hour and a half, and really that's where the work and the passion, the fun, the learning, the growth. So I will be quiet now. Any specific questions we can help with? Ask them, please.
I would like to say that this is exactly what the students at David Douglas High School are looking for. Whether it's from the hats and hoods policy to the inequalities in discipline to diversifying curriculum, everything like that, that's exactly what we're talking about. My only concern is that a lot of the students don't realize that our school board is working to make change. So is there any way that we could pair up with our head of communications? Obviously, I am the representative of Student Voice here. So is there any way, is this kind of like under wraps, or are we allowed to like blow this out of proportion and tell everybody?
Blow it up.
This is very important, because this is exactly what people are talking about in all of the interviews with our students and staff. The students were mentioning how they feel underrepresented within our staff. So I think it's very important to talk about the Grow Your Own project and to talk about that commitment to diversifying our staff and making sure our students feel like they have a place in our community. So good job. Good job. This is great.
Thank you, Aspen. And Board Chair Stevens said, blow it up. Absolutely. Share it. Pick it apart. Look at it. Ask questions. But I'll also offer and open up, as you and your team and leadership and other groups and organizations throughout the schools are having these conversations, literally a phone call, a text, your administration, Mr. Carradine, Ms. Stiff, all they have to do is reach out. We would love to come to have this workshop with you and to have the conversations and learn. So, literally would love that. So please don't hesitate. Hey, can we invite the superintendent? Or you'd probably like to hear from all them better, but we will be there. I can tell you that. And we'd love to have the conversation and learn from you. Yeah.
I actually had written down on my paper for when you were talking about CRTs, are students aware of any of this? So thank you for saying that, because I agree. I think there's so much good work that is going on and has been going on over the last few years that is really seriously moving in such a great direction. And I don't know that the students are aware that it's happening, and it may look like to them nobody's listening to us, but you really are, and I think that's great. I had other questions. Where did I think there was UDL think maybe Mary mentioned, where did that come from? Like, who's the creator of these? What I guess it grabbed my attention when you say anything is universal. So I just wondered, where did that come from?
Yeah, actually, universal design actually came from making buildings accessible for all people initially. And through that process, I think architects decided or realized that you can make a building much more beautiful and accessible to everybody if you do it in the design phase rather than having to retrofit things later.
Right.
So that's really the concept, the base concept of universal design. And then it came into the education field thinking, well, if we really design education, we think about what might be the possible barriers for students in the design phase, then we can eliminate those barriers.
Okay.
So when you're designing your instruction and you're looking at a lesson, you're thinking specifically about the students in your class and anticipating what those barriers might be. So when you design it, you're giving lots of options. So there's going to be a lot of different ways that students can demonstrate their knowledge. There's going to be a lot of different ways that the knowledge is being presented. Some students might give a speech by doing a recorded video ahead of time, and that's okay. You don't have to give your speech live. You can do it in your room if you're really nervous, that kind of thing. Those are just some examples.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
And then with the discipline, in the discussion about mindfulness, how do you follow up to know that's implemented? Like, is there a way that, I guess, and this applies to, I guess, there's all these multiple wonderful staff development trainings that are going on or will go on, and you're going to put in hours and lots of resource and finances to make those happen.
Yeah.
What has been discussed as far as how, and I know we should see a difference with our students, but I just wondered how you will follow up to see that all that training is being implemented in the classroom.
Yeah, great question. Around the mindfulness work, again, the pandemic kind of messed things up there, because where we would start with that is we would start with the adults. And so they learn the curriculum and they learn themselves how to identify their own triggers, and how to, take care of themselves so that they can take care of their students. So it's kind of like that mentality of, like, if you're on the airplane and it goes down, you put the mask on yourself so that you can then take care of somebody else. So that's really the part where we have probably the most data, and that's just done through staff surveys. The company that we're working with always does a staff survey, and all of our surveys have come back, like 95% of teachers say this is needed and it's helpful. So the next step is then creating mindful schools and mindful classrooms. So if you looked at those cohorts, there's 3 cohorts. Cohort 1 right now, that's what they're working on. So they've had now 2 years of mindfulness, and what they're working on is trying to create a mindful environment. So that's anywhere from what does the building feel like when you walk in? Is it welcoming? Is it cluttered? Is there fluorescent lighting? Are classrooms calm? Those types of things. And then that's really dovetailed into our social emotional learning. So the toolbox curriculum that they use teaches students how to be mindful and how to, learn how to identify the triggers in their own body and then what to do to calm themselves.
Okay. Who would be asking those questions? Who would be the people walking around and assessing that?
It should be really built into the culture of the classroom at that point. So you might come in the morning, and kids at the morning circle or the morning greeting, they might take a moment to take a mindful minute and just calm their body, take a few deep breaths. They'll use that again in transitions. But again, like I said, it's a little bit dubbed with the curriculum, so that's being explicitly taught during the day. So we use something called Toolbox, and there are 12 tools that the kids are using, anywhere from deep breathing to taking a break, how to take a break. They have a tool called the garbage can, which is like if something is bothering you and you say you don't really need to hold on to that, you can just throw that in the garbage can, like those things like that. This is elementary.
Right.
Yeah.
But that, I guess what I'm asking is, so is all of that left, it's just the classroom teacher who is assessing whether or not it is being implemented and whether it's going well, or are there other people who are outside of that who are observing and saying and giving feedback?
Well, the expectation that we set is that there would be 30 minutes a week of explicit teaching. If that's so, that the principal would be the one to make sure that that's being implemented. It's actually even part of our health curriculum. The social emotional learning kind of falls under the health curriculum, so it should be explicitly being taught 30 minutes a week, and then the teacher's obviously prompting students to use it when it's needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my last question is just, is it possible for the board to get any of that, the recommended, I guess a recommended reading list? It seemed like you're sharing some good materials. Could you share the titles and things with us?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yep.
We want to learn too. Gabriella, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Aspen's sentiment. As an alumni, I'm very proud of the district for all the change that's been made, in the time that I haven't been a student. So I'm very thankful for the team who's made this happen. And yeah, I'm really, really excited. I did have 2 questions. One of them was around, I think during the curriculum portion, talking mostly about language arts, and I was wondering if there's any plan to implement that across subjects, and what does that look like?
Yes, there is. So the whole intention is every time we adopt curriculum that we will do this, and then on top of that is current curriculum. But right now the focus language art happens to be what's on. It's up. It's its turn to be adopted. So that's why we're going through this whole process to adopt the curriculum. I believe math is next year. Yeah, so math's next year, and the intention is yes, we're redoing, changing, updated how we select curriculum and what that looks like. So for math, we'll do the same thing and get better at it and go deeper. And then for all of our curriculums, so every year, basically, there's curriculums on a 7-year cycle. So each year, there's kind of new curriculums that come up, and we try to stay on top of it. So we'll definitely be doing it with the new curriculums, but there's also a vision to be thinking about. There are curriculums that maybe you're only in year 2 and they 5 years left. So how do we do some of this work and engage in some of these conversations so we don't have to wait 5 more years? We're not there yet, and we're kind of busy with adopting the curriculum, but that's kind of the idea as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my other question is, how does that work? And then I did have a questions around CCTs, the teams, and was wondering how are students identified? Is it solely based on discipline, or how are students supported or recommended to be supported through that? Or how would students know to ask for that support?
They would be identified. They could be referred by a parent or by a teacher, but our original thought would be data driven. Attendance, grades, discipline were the big 3 things that we would be using to identify. Yeah.
Thank you. That was my question.
Go ahead, Director Barrow.
Thanks. I have a lot of questions, but my head's spinning. There's just so much to take in and so much that's happening. I don't think I'm going to ask any of them. I do want to say, though, that it's kind of raised in a culture that sort of believes that change is scary and dangerous, and it doesn't, benefit at least me as a group. And I want to say I'm so excited that everything that I've seen that's coming out of this process is helping to move the ball forward and make our school district so much better. And I'm really looking forward to having my children experience the changes in the curriculum, in the teaching staff. It's amazing. And I'm very grateful that so many people have been laying the groundwork for this massive change, that my kids can benefit from this. And I think that the best part of this whole process is that not only do things get better for kids, black and brown kids, but they get better for everybody. And that's just amazing. A lot of the things I heard tonight I'm just so excited to see the school, grow. I guess my only question would be, with the trainings that the teachers have been going through, which is really exciting, is there any way to kind of move the ball forward to the universities and to the college system so that when we bring in teachers, we're bringing in teachers that are educated in these subject areas already, kind of let them know that this is what's important to us and in our future teachers.
So really, Candy began this conversation before me, but I'm currently working with Eastern Oregon and Warner Pacific and PCC about exactly that, right? Because that's part of our Grow Your Own program. And what Eastern Oregon told me is, Tay, we could actually have your very own teachers teach your expectations around discipline, around your equity plan, and things of that nature. So absolutely, we see the need for it, and it is part of a conversation.
That's really great. Thanks again for all the work that you're doing and that everyone's doing. I'm extremely impressed and grateful.
Thank you.
So I just want to add to that because that's been a regional conversation as well with superintendents across the region, that how do we connect with our universities better and basically say, who are we preparing? Who's coming out? Who's walking in our doors? And are they ready to interact and work with our students, right? And are they being taught in an old model or a new model to simplify things? And it's been a push and a conversation for a number of years. I will say, I don't know if resistance is the right word, but turning a big machine as a university, we weren't getting a lot of traction. Over the last couple years, there seems to be a lot more interest and understanding that, there's different ways to do things, and our students need change. They need educators to understand them in a different format and light. So we definitely have some movement and more conversations around our university partners related to that, which is exciting. But again, it hasn't been perfect. So I just wanted to add that. I want to add two more things as well, just because Tay's here. One is specifically, Donna, what you talked about is who's measuring and how, again, principals technically, and then we also have Director of Education, Andy, who when he comes into the buildings to visit, which he's in buildings every day, what are the key performance? What are the things that I can ask about? What can we be looking at? Not as a gotcha, but a gotcha, right? We're supporting and what you measure is what you treasure kind of thing, right? So keeping it at the forefront. And when we are meeting with our administrative teams and talking about it, that this needs to be part of what we talk about and where are we at, and give examples and how can we support each other. So those are other pieces as well. It's not just the principals. You evaluate it, tell us, it's all of us together. We need to keep it on the forefront when we're walking into classrooms and ask about it. Didn't see that. I wonder about this. Where are we at? Oh, that's a perfect example. Can you share that? So, and I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but it's definitely there. And I can tell you, biggest smile I've had in a long time. I walked into a classroom, I think 2 weeks ago, walked into a third grade classroom, and a student had his tool belt in front of him on his desk, right, his tool belt right there, and it was breathing, and he was practicing breathing, and he told me, right, talk about metacognition, he told me what he was doing, why he was doing it, asked me if I wanted to practice and try it. So it is out there. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but I got a breathing lesson, and tell you what, I need it sometimes. The third thing, just to brag on Tay a little bit, and just Aspen, not to downplay what Aspen said, because absolutely, if it's not everywhere and kids don't know it, what are we doing, right? Or young adults, I'm sorry, Aspen, right? Kids, I was talking about elementary a minute ago, but our young adults all the way down to our kids, that's where it is. And if they don't know what's going on, then what are we doing? So we need to get better at that. But I just want to share, like, for example, cultural responsive teaching practices. I'm wondering if Tay would be willing to talk about when she was at Alice Thought, she actually did a project with the kids, had them video, asked them questions about it. I don't know if you can do a snapshot of that, just because it is, we understand that. We understand that, and there are specific pockets where we're being intentional, and this is a great example of that.
So again, when we speak of our CRTs, we had 27 CRTs that we really pushed out to our administrators. And one of those CRTs were wait time. And what I did, I think maybe 5 or 6 students really talk about what wait time meant to them. And some students replied that having that opportunity to have wait time, they felt like they were supported in the classroom and they had a moment to really go back and reflect on their learning. In addition, for our students who are not English native speaking, however, said, I need that wait time to have a moment to switch from my native language back to English. So asking those questions and ensuring our students honestly understand what our CRTs are, better support us in the learning in the classroom, along with students definitely benefiting from that.
So ultimately, it's so powerful, right? Because if we're doing it, why don't everyone in the classroom, in the school, understand what we're doing and the why we're doing it? So we're working together and, oh, okay, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. So,
have you been getting pushback from the teaching community? I know that the growth process can be kind of hard, and changing the way you think can be challenging. Have you been getting pushback when it comes to the trainings, or just... Also, you said that 75 teachers have gone through them. Are these voluntary? People have gone through it voluntarily, or is it just, are you just saying, hey, these trainings are what we're going to do, or is it part of the culture yet, or is it just still kind of a voluntary thing?
On that one? So it's laughing because you Aaron, you talked about it. Change, right? What is change? And change can be hard. And starting with the why and communicating what we're doing and why. And I can tell you that I believe our district's primed and teachers are ready, and they understand that our students do need different avenues for them to be successful. So overall, I would say no. Is there, oh my gosh, resistance, turnover. But when you add training time and add new courses and you add, right, this is workload and the reality. I'm going to be giving a presentation a little later tonight from our teachers that this year, what they're feeling and where they're at. There's definitely some conversations about that, but not just with our equity trainings, with any kind of training where we're doing and meetings we're doing. There's a feeling of being overwhelmed right now, and I think that's part of the trauma of what we've all been through. So I'll be sharing a little bit of data on that, but just to be clear, do some people ask the question, why are we doing this, right? But we take that as, well, then we need a better job of communicating what that why is, right? We need to do a better job of sharing, this is why we're doing it, and this is what it looks like. And I can tell you, we also have many staff we've been waiting, right? Just like Aspen's saying, the students, they're waiting, right? We have staff, same thing, let's go. You're too slow, superintendent, let's go, we're ready. So, but I'll let Tay answer too.
And he answered perfectly. Definitely, there are so many teachers who are saying, I am very happy about this, taking their own personal time. And again, we've tried to help support our administrators, ensuring that PD is made available to our staff so this work could really get out. But we definitely have people who are just right there. And again, you're going to always have a few naysayers. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop doing the work, right? The hard work is some of the best work.
Thanks again.
Well, did you have?
Yes, I think that at this point, a lot of the questions were asked. So it's a very complex work, equity work, as I appreciate. And that was one of my questions, how is it really going? I know equity work is really messy and it's very personal. And so I appreciate that question from you, Aaron. And also, I had the privilege to be be invited to be part of the Ron Russell equity team. And that gave me a lot of perspective on how's it really going in the building. And 3 things that came up when I was in the meeting around student achievement was grading practices and homework, and then making the PD available to also classified staff as well as community partners, because we have a number of community partners in David Douglas. So I think that would be really important. And so making it accessible to students and also as board members so that we're aligned in the language and the work so that I can be more supportive. Another thing around student achievement is we talked about adopting curriculum. I'm really curious about access to curriculum, and that's always been the scope of my educational work. How is that looking for SPED students, ESL students, and also homeless students? And to include that, I think the markers, my brain is like foggy, but I didn't hear attendance in that student achievement goal, so I would be curious to look at chronic absenteeism, because I think that's really important. That's always put in the back burner. And how do those students get access to this curriculum, and how are they engaged in this as well? And so I think making sure we don't leave out those particular student demographics. And I would like to know what is the demographic of students participating in empathy interviews? Is it really a cohesive feedback from a large student body? And I know it's a lot of questions because this is what I am passionate about. I think those are my two big questions.
Okay, there's a lot there, so I'm going to try. And I'm wondering if Brooke can come up and join me, because we'll talk a little bit about, so first of all, the curriculum, we can talk a little bit about that and access, but ultimately that is part of the process. And as Brooke said, we just started to get into the curriculum. So when we come and present curriculums and the team comes and shares, that'll definitely be part of that presentation is, look, this is the access, this is what it looks like. But I'll stop there because Brooke will do better. But I do want to also, just attendance, absolutely, it's right on, and it wasn't part of this. I mean, there's many things that weren't necessarily part of this presentation, but attendance is something that we are very interested in, concerned about, and celebrate. And the reality of, it's one of our KPIs, our key performance indicators, and basically we have attendance teams that they meet and basically start with anyone where they're at, whatever percentage, and we go all the way through each student. This student has a 72%. Why? What are we going to do? Level 1, level 2, and every school has that, and basically goes through student by student, gets as far as they can with the time they have in that meeting. But like, I just had the privilege of sitting in on one of those meetings, and we started at an elementary school, started with students, talked about who had the connection with the family, what's going on, is this really a chronic attendance issue, or is there something else going on? Oh, look, last month it was fine, really it's just this is what the mom said. You know, secretaries in there because they have that connection with the family. We had our attendance coordinator in there, principal, our son's school coordinator. So we're going through that process, and oh, this needs communication. We're going to do a care call. We're going to send a letter. So there is a lot of work going around attendance, and then also Andy takes a lot of ownership in that and sets goals and targets for our buildings as well, which is probably a whole separate presentation, but we can definitely, one, make sure that happens, and two is why I know anytime you can give Andy a call, and he'd love to walk you through a little bit more what we do, if that's okay. But I can get him up here after Brooke too. Brooke, you want to talk a little bit about access?
Yeah, so when we think about access to curriculum, we can always get the materials, right? We can always get the books or the computer or the digital access or the hotspot. But when we're talking about access in our team, we're talking about access to grade level, rigorous, challenging materials. And that's, if you read the opportunity myth, that's exactly what it's about, is students have big dreams and everything, but in our classrooms, especially our underserved students, are not always getting access to the rigorous grade level text. And so that is our charge, is to make sure that we are choosing high quality materials, and that we're staying with the high standard, with the grade level standard, but we're providing the parts that Mary talked about with Universal Design for Learning. We're providing multiple pathways for them to access this, rather than our traditional one way, I'm going to give you the assignment, I hope you do it and you turn it in. We just can't do that anymore. So I know that might be a little bit of different definition, but trying to really hone it in, access to grade level standards. And it's something we're struggling with right now because of COVID and, feeling like we've lost a year of learning. So what does that look like? How do we ensure that we're not doing remediation, but that we're really accelerating students? And I think these are some of the conversations being had right now. So I don't know if that gets to your question, but we definitely can give them access to the physical or the digital materials. What we want to be mindful of is it on grade level? And I think one of your other questions was, who were the students as part of the empathy interviews? And we can definitely get you that information. We asked the teachers who volunteered to choose students who were historically marginalized, because if we go with other students, we're maintaining the status quo. So we did collect the demographic data at the end of the interview if students were willing to share. They had an opportunity to say they prefer not to share, but I can definitely get you that so you can see exactly who it was.
Aspen?
Just very quickly, I definitely think it's important to stay on grade level when it comes to the curriculum. But I will say, for instance, I've always been in advanced classes, so I've always had like that deeper understanding of learning. But in my English class, we just, we wrote an essay about linguistic dual consciousness and linguistic double consciousness, and we read articles from 1903. It's very advanced reading material, and even some students in our class didn't even know what was going on. So yes, I think that it's very important to get the message out there, but I think that we do need to be conscious about, we have, lost a year of learning, it feels like, and a lot of our students have lost motivation, feel like they don't know how to do school anymore. So I think that when it comes to grade level, we need to reanalyze what grade level looks like after COVID.
Yep,
That's some youth
100%.
truth right there.
Yes. So staying on grade level, but what are those scaffolded supports? That sounds really complex. What you were just talking about. Yeah, to make it understandable and comprehensible. And part of that is that there's not one right way or one right thing to read, or only one if you're trying to get to your learning objective. Again, what are those pathways? Rather than going back and trying to uncover previous grade level standards, because what we do is we widen the opportunity and the achievement gap. But we still need to make sure we're addressing those too. It's a challenge, and that's why teaching is so hard, because there's all of these different components that come into play when planning a lesson. So thank you for saying that.
Okay, so y'all are kind of blowing my mind tonight a little bit. I remember 5 years ago sitting right there before I was on the school board when there was an inclusive district resolution put forward, and it barely passed, 4-3. To go from there to where we are today is a sea change in this district, and I am not claiming it's the board. I'd love to be part of that story, but it is a whole district effort. And change happens when it's bidirectional. It doesn't happen from the top down, right? It happens from the top down, the bottom up, and everything in the middle. I think the story of what's happened here is incredible. I also think the fact that power was shared and given to people impacted, whether it was the teachers of color affinity group or the equity committee, which included community members. We do read those and analyze those youth truth surveys, but clearly we need to do a better job of communicating back and forth. I am shocked that this much change has already happened in that amount of time. And I just want to say thank you to every single person who has participated in this work to date. Clearly we're just beginning, but it's really inspiring. And to have done this during a global pandemic is incredible. That said, my questions, okay. I guess one would be, Mary, the federal grant on mindfulness that I was so excited, I remember 3 years ago, can't believe how fast 3 years have gone, but the fact that we're in the last year, what will be the impact of losing that grant in the coming years? It doesn't seem like everything's really been operationalized as we hoped, simply because, I know there are new things coming up post-COVID. I'm very interested to hear, how staff are experiencing the environment. Needed more than ever, but what's the future look like for the work?
We actually have 3 years left on the federal grant.
Oh, I thought it was year 3. We were in year 3.
It's a 5-year grant.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
Problem solved.
And we actually are only in the second. So we actually funded the mindfulness 1 year prior, and that was actually some of I think that helped us get the grant was just the work that we were already doing and already clearly committed to. So we had already purchased curriculum, and we're already a nationally recognized PBIS district, and that helped tremendously to get this grant. So yes, we have 3 years left.
Thank you. Has it been difficult this year to operationalize some of what had been started before kids were back, and what have been the challenges?
Yeah. The challenges are we have a lot of money that we can't spend because we budgeted for subs for professional learning. So we would have been much further along in the rollout of the restorative practices professional learning if we could do that. What we have money to send people to national conferences and things like that, but so much of it was budgeted for subs. We can reallocate that money, but then, we need our teachers with students right now, so we have to find other ways.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Donna.
I just want to say again how important what like you said, what we all are doing here, and this is really transformative education. And I think I've said this to Tay before, I hope you are documenting every step of this process, what you did, how you did it, because I really believe that it can be a model for transforming education in our nation as we know it. And I'm just so grateful for all of you and the work that you do.
Thanks, Donna. Just real quick, just because you opened that door, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Our leadership team, my cabinet, your cabinet, they are the best in the state, period. They're leading this work. I'm proud. I would say we're in front of so many districts, and that's not putting anyone down. It's just real that we're willing to go there. And I know Stephanie says it's not the board, but the reality of providing conditions, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what we talk about, the conditions for learning, the conditions for a district. So having a board that's supportive and having a board that's listening and having a board that's just saying, hey, let's look at accountability, not because let's talk about again, gotcha, but because what can we do better? How can we help? How can we support? So all of those are helpful. And then I don't want to leave out, again, I'm giving kudos to my cabinet because they are amazing, but our building principals, what they're doing, what they do, I know many of you have relationships with them. They are the real deal. And then finally, this works, when we're in front of kids, whether it's our bus drivers greeting kids in the morning, the very first people our students see are our bus drivers, right? How they be greeting and connected with our teachers, our food service. I truly think our group of employees are amazing and are here, and sometimes change is hard, but they also, if we can talk about that why, they're right there. Every one of us are here for kids. So let's not sit on opposite sides of the table. Let's talk about how we come together and do that transformational work and really do things better. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Aspen, yes, blow it up. Dan, blow it up in the community too, because clearly, we need to reach our community and let them know what we're doing here as well. I'm hearing some of this, and then with the testimony we got from the Somali parent, right, and being able to share, what our dreams are, and for folks to feel part of that process. Thank you so much, and we're still on track. Yay. Okay, so we're going to move on to Oregon School Board Association elections. So for those of you who are new, there's this thing called the OSBA. School Board Association, the Oregon School Board Association is our affiliate in the state. And like any other elected body, they have directors, and they have positions that are open for school board members to run. The purpose of OSBA really is to be our affinity group with other board members, both in the state and the country. And there's all kinds of opportunities and learnings that go along with that. But what we get to do as David Douglas School District's board is we get one vote as a board. We don't vote individually. That then gets combined with other districts' votes for positions that are open in our district. So on the OSBA. So the ones that we will be voting on, the candidates tonight, are for 3 different positions. They're not running against each other. The first one is the position 17 Legislative Policy Committee. Okay, so that's their policy committee. And there's one name, which is Elizabeth Durant from Park Rose. So yay, East Portland. And then the position 18, which is Legislative Policy Committee as well, but in position 18. And that's Jessica Arzate from Multnomah ESD. And then the board of directors, position 18, which is Chris Kawat from Gresham Barlow. So there are 3 names, different positions. I am going to make a motion that we approve all 3 and vote on the slate. Anyone want to second that?
I second.
Second. Any discussion of the candidates? All right. Aaron Barrow?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Donna?
Aye.
Stephanie? Aye. And Hua?
Aye.
All right, so that's done. The next thing we have on the agenda is our bond update.
Good evening. So we have approximately 25 members on our bond development committee. So we've got quite a wide range and diverse group. We've had 3 meetings so far, and this week we are actually off. We are using our consultants, Jeremy Wright and Ben Patinkin. If you remember, he did some polling for us last year. And they are actually taking the information from the committee, and they're polling and testing 3 different bond levy levels of 85, 120, and 150 million. And so we're hoping to get all that information back and be able to discuss that at our next committee meeting on the 29th. And I just want to remind you of the next steps as we move towards a potential bond for May of 2022, coming very quickly, is that we'll be submitting our long-range facility plan and making sure our facility assessments are all up to par. So that's due by December 1st with Oregon Department of Education. And then they use that information along with our awesome grant application, which I'll bring to you at the next board meeting for approval. And that will probably be guided on what we find out from our polling and our community meetings. And then we can submit that application for a potential $8 million match should we actually be successful in levying a bond. So some things we'll need to keep track of going forward is those deadlines for filing with the elections division. So February 25th is our first, and that's for that ballot title. And then March 17th is for the actual notice for the election. So we'll need to make sure that we get those in and get those narrowed down. Any questions?
Aaron?
Yeah, you said that you have to come up with some plans to make sure that the facilities are up to par.
What's required to get an awesome grant is you have to have a facility plan both submitted to Oregon Department of Education. And so we did our facility plan last spring, if you recall. And so we did our facility assessments a few years back. You have the option that you can file for a CAP grant or and a technical assistance grant every 4 years, I believe. So we missed the timeline on the long-range facility plan, so we actually didn't submit it when we finished it. So we'll be submitting it now. And we did actually get the grant for our assessments, which were a few years ago. And so those have already been accepted by ODE. So they'll look at that facility assessment and they'll go through a checklist and make sure everything's in it. If for some reason there's something that's missing, they'll work with us on getting that updated and added.
Did that include any security improvements? I've been a little bit worried about, like Ventura, not having a fencing structure on the back, lack of lighting at night, just things I've been noticing.
So there's $190 million worth of identified deferred maintenance needs, and you can see that at the top we're looking at $150 million. So most likely there'll be a lot of decision making on what goes into that bond and what meets, what kind of comes to the top as the highest priority needs. In the past, we've had a lot of discussions about the parks that are next to our schools, which we love having. And we've had several discussions with the city about how making things more accessible between the school district and the Parks Department. But as some of the environment in our community has changed a little bit, you know, we've been talking more about, do we need to fence things more in just to keep things a little more enclosed for safety measures, but that has not risen to the top in the discussion points.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Thank you, Pat. All right, the next thing on our agenda is some board policy, first reading, and I believe presenting is Ken Richardson, illustrious superintendent.
I heard that. I like that. I'm going to tell my wife when I get home tonight. I'm illustrious. Sorry, it's been a long day, a long week, but thank you, sincerely thank you. With that said, yes, so today's a first reading. Reminder, first reading, there's really no actions at all. It's really just introductions. But I wanted to back us up one step, because in the policy process, we have board representatives on what's called the policy committee. And what happens is anytime that we get new policies in, we do a quick scan that kind of shows, sometimes there's decisions to be made, and then what I'll do is superintendent makes some recommendations. But typically I don't want to say, oh no, we're not going with that, or we're not doing this, or we are doing that. And what I mean by that is what we get basically required, recommended, and optional. So there's many policies that come in that I could say, well, those are optional, we don't need them. But I don't want to do that without the team. So my point is COVID's been a little bit different, and we haven't really been staying on top of policy for a number of different reasons, and now they're starting to roll again. OSBA is starting basically monthly. They sit in policies that go through Lori. Lori organizes those and gets them to me and says, okay, here's some decision points, but what we're going to start doing is following our policy organization or policy committee process. And what happens usually is once we review them and I make any kind of recommendations, then we send them to that committee for a first read. It's really not even first read, to look at it, because you might see an optional policy and say, yeah, that we don't need that. We don't need to bring it before the board, but that would be the committee that talks about that. And typically we bring everything, to be quite honest. But ultimately, I just wanted to share that we're going to start kind of formalizing that process. So today, we didn't do that because I didn't get an opportunity to explain that and have a conversation. And we have new members. We have new team members on it. So I wanted to share what that looks like. So what you have in front of you today is you have basically, three policies, one AR. And the top three are required policies with recommended changes. So we already have those policies. So what you'll be reading and looking at after this meeting and later on throughout the month is changes that OSBA is recommending to our required policies. And then the last policy under there is new policy. That's not a required policy. But remember last month or 2 months ago when I presented and shared a little bit about an administrative rule related to transportation, and one of the things in there had to do with the radio frequency identification. And I think it was even Stephanie, maybe multiple people said, you know, we'd like to continue this conversation. This is me summarizing. We'd like to continue this conversation, and we think probably a policy around this would be good. So this is the first sample of a policy. Again, tonight there's not really conversation, but we're hoping through a first read, you'll take a look, and then when we come back next time, we can either, 1, approve all of them, 2, approve some of them, 3, approve none of them, and then go to a second reading and go to a third reading. But this is how it initiates the process. So a little bit of an explanation, and then just sharing what those 3 policies, 1 AR for your review are. My belief, I'm going to take this, I should have wrote it down, and I apologize. I believe our policy committee is Aaron, Hua, and Stephanie's the alternate. I'm on it. Yeah, I'm on it. Yeah. So Juan, Aaron, you'll start seeing emails from me, Lori and I, and I mean we're all a team here, but that's just kind of the process. And then Stephanie, you're the alternate. Yeah.
Okay, I'll pay attention. No, Aaron, you look like.
Excuse me. I do have one question about the new RFI, radio frequency identification, ECACA. On the opt-out provisions, it says on bullet point number 3, ensure that the request is completed within 3 school days, but it doesn't have any sort of like, I can't figure out what 3 school days from the beginning of the school year, from when the parent first decides that they don't want that device. I mean, it doesn't actually say 3 school days from when, so I just thought I'd highlight that because it's a little confusing. But otherwise, it seems pretty strong to me.
That's something, again, through the team, you have a young team.
Oh, okay. So we're not actually going to review these policies specifically tonight. We're going to wait for next month to do that.
Well, we can. I mean, to review what you're saying. We aren't making any decisions.
Okay.
We could discuss them. Yes.
Oh, okay. I was like, can we
No,
comment on
you can discuss them. I think it's interesting that we've ever since I've been on the board, we say we have a policy committee, and we never actually meet. It's been sort of like, give Lori your changes. And so I think, as the 2 folks that are on the committee, it'll sort of be up to you how you want to communicate together and how you want to give, suggestions for changes. And certainly we can always have time to talk about them on the agenda. So yeah, it's a committee, but whether or not you meet together or you just kind of talk to Lori and present things for us, I mean, it's up to you.
And Aaron, specifically on that one, I think what it's saying, although again, we can change it, clarify, get more, but the opt-out parents or students who are 14 years of age or older may provide notice in writing that they no longer wish to participate in any RIFT program. And then it goes down the district shall. So if we get that request, we shall not ask for a reason, not impose. And then number 3, we will ensure that the request is completed with 3 days. So I think what the intention of that and what it's saying is that if a parent comes to us and says, I'm opting out, I don't want my student involved in this, we need to make that done, completed within 3 days. But obviously, if it's not clear, we need to update that.
No, that's great. It totally clarifies it. Yeah, it changed. Yeah, I understand it from that perspective.
Gabriella?
Yeah, I had a point, or I want to ask a point of clarification. In the voluntary opt-in program, they're on the second point, like on the second page, there's a district wishing to expand the opt-in RIF program to students without valid consent form must provide a same 30-day notification with any of the RFID programs. So I was wondering, what does the notification mean? Like, what is the conversation with parents if their student has been opted into the program, or what situations would that happen? Or at least am I misunderstanding what that means?
I'm not sure I'm tracking. So you're under you're under voluntary opt-in.
Yeah, on the third point. Sorry, on the
third. So district wishing to expand the opt-in RIFT program to students without a valid consent form on file must provide the same 30-day notification as with any RIFT program. So basically it's saying that if we don't have a consent form in before we can make any changes, there's got to be a 30-day notification process that we go through with families.
So the family would be notified, given that 30-day notice, and then their student would be opted in if they don't.
If the district wishes to expand, yeah. I don't think our district would operate that way, but that's what this policy is saying. Yes, the policy. I believe what that means is that the students without valid consent, if we wanted to expand it, we have to get notification of any kind of expansion of the program.
Yeah, and is there any kind of verification that a notification has been received, like if parents have received that and they are aware that that's going to happen?
Yeah, no.
That's never happened? Okay.
Well, never is hard. I mean, there are times in district with certain things we do certified mail. There's things where we do, but it would be difficult, I think, for a whole district-wide to guarantee that everyone got the communication. To be quite honest, that would be difficult. It'd be something we could work for. It's something we strive for, but I don't know if there's a way that we could, other than it's opt-in. I mean, knowing that it's opt-in, we can't, without the opt-in, they don't move forward.
Anyone else?
Does
Oh,
that-
yeah, go ahead.
That does bring up a couple of questions. I appreciate you bringing that up, Gabriela. Does that mean that the district would expand to like monitoring when kids come into the building or something? Or it seems like when it expand the program from busing to what?
No, well, to be quite honest, I don't know. My understanding of it is just for transportation. If there's something comes through that it's expanding the program, the process, what it looks like, that's what that piece would cover.
So-
Again, this is the second time in a row we've done this, and I apologize because I'm really not here to present this. I'm just sharing it and I apologize. That's my fault. I don't have all the answers. So we talked about actually doing a presentation from the transportation department, and we just didn't. This month wasn't the right month to put it on the agenda. So there's still a plan to do a presentation on this from transportation, in which we can really get down into it. I'm just bringing this because last time we talked, there was why don't we start with a policy? So to be totally honest, my bad, I'm not prepared really to answer. So you're probably feeling that, and I'm sorry, Erin. I don't have all the answers to this yet. So
I think the policy committee should convene and ask some questions that will help form a presentation on this. I mean, I guess one of the things that we had talked about was, are there ways to like check in more easily to like games and things like that? That's kind of when I think expansion, I think of things like that. But I don't know. I think we should probably move on for this agenda item to committee updates. And Donna and I had been talking about how we'd like to get a sense from you if ahead of time you do have something to put on the agenda from your committee, or perhaps a liaison duty. So each of us have liaison duties, whether it's with labor or whether it's, with a particular school. You have liaison duties with certain schools. And we want to leave this on the agenda, but we'd like it a little more organized. So we're just asking if, ahead of time, the week ahead, you could let us know if you have a committee report. In the past, we've left it entirely open, and these board meetings have run an hour over with board members talking about all kinds of things. So we want to try to avoid that, but also include not just the regular board committees, but also your liaison, anything that you're hearing on the ground that you think you'd like your colleagues to know in this space. So that's a question, or does folks feel like that's a good direction? Okay. Does anyone have a committee report? Nope. All right, then moving on. So we have a budget item to approve, Pat. This one, the Menlo Park one, hurt my heart a lot because of the price tag, but I'd love for you to come up and let us know what the capital expenditures are that we'll be looking at tonight.
So you'll notice on your agenda it says Cherry Park and Menlo Park, and yes, so we have been looking at using some of the ESSER funding for some of the capital needs that are eligible, and replacing HVAC systems, obviously, due to the current pandemic, is one of the suggested uses. And so probably one of our highest needs is Menlo Park. And in evaluating the cost there, it would be $5.1 million to replace the HVAC system there. It'll include some upgraded filtration and replace the antiquated boilers. I believe they've been replaced once in the past however many years, but are due again. And then the school buses are there. We would like to do 3. That would help with some of the social distancing, as well as replacing with a newer model which has better circulation and ventilation. And we are not moving forward Cherry Park at this time. So I do want to make sure that you're aware we haven't bid anything. We simply have gone through some cost estimates, and usually they're pretty good at that. As you are aware, we have a lot of school districts around us who have bond money to spend, and construction prices are skyrocketing every year. So we anticipate that's what the cost will be. We'll know more when it actually goes out to bid if you approve it. And we, once approved, we will go through and do all of the design that's needed to get it out to bid the end of January, anticipating we would bring it back to you in the February meeting.
Questions? Aaron's thinking of one.
And I like anything there that our kids are breathing. So it's kind of exciting.
And this is money, ESSER money, so important to know that's where it's coming from. Although I have to say, I remember doing Ventura Park and approving a $600,000 expenditure, and this is $5.1 million.
Yeah, and we were kind of fortunate with Ventura Park because we bought the boilers through the surplus. That somebody purchased boilers by, I guess, accident. I don't know how you do that. And through state surplus, they came up and we got them for a bargain. I don't even think we spent $1,000 for both.
Nuts. Okay. Anyone want to move approval of this monster? I move it.
I'll
Second.
Oh.
Okay, Aaron, I move the second by Aaron here, and Director Barrow.
Aye.
Director Saldana Lopez.
Aye.
Director Barber.
Aye.
Stevens votes aye, and Director Nguyen.
Aye.
All right, get a good bid. Look at the surplus. Just kidding. We want our kids to have healthy air. Okay, we are now, stay there because we're doing financial investment report.
Yes. Oh, something happened to the scan there a little bit, didn't it? You'll notice from last time, due to the reduction in ADM statewide. So if you recall, I was probably being the little parakeet going, oh no, because I thought we would go up if kids came back to school. It's gone the opposite direction. So what that means is, of course, when you're at the Thanksgiving table and there's one pie and you invited 8 people and 6 people show up, yay, everybody gets a bigger piece of pie. So what we're seeing is the result of that is extra funding, because that raises the amount of money per ADM, and that flows through to us. Now, that can have repercussions later on should those students come back. So, and as you're aware, the state school fund numbers get updated multiple times throughout the year, so I'll keep you updated that I'm not anticipating that particular item to change that much. We do have a couple more factors that are coming into play here. So we just had the economic forecast yesterday, and if anybody paid attention, it's just gone bonkers. The state has more money than I think they know what to do with. They are projecting a 2024 kicker. It would be nice if some of that at some point came through for education. The next item on there is the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimator. We couldn't make the name just a little bit longer. So you'll hear me refer to SAPI a lot, and that's our poverty estimates, and those are based on some federal data points. And they usually put that information out in mid-December for the prior year. We're always a year behind. So we'll see how that is affected. I'm anticipating, if anything, it'll stay stable. We've seen, I think, the last year or so, it kind of stabilized for us and rather than decrease. So I'm hoping that it will remain that way, and then we won't have to worry too much about that affecting our revenue. So technology fund, again, just a reminder, we have that negative balance. We have been communicating back and forth with E-rate. They asked a few follow-up questions, and so we're still anticipating we will get those funds. It's just a very slow process. I did want to let you know on the Nutrition Services Fund, we do anticipate around $450,000 in pandemic funding. That's a small chunk of change compared to the 1.6 million. I think we ended up actually having a deficit of. So we did use some of our ESSER funding to bring some of that up, but we will be receiving that to help bridge that gap. And then in the investment report, there's really not a lot to say. We haven't had a lot of extra funds that we needed to do any particular separate investments for, like a Fannie Mae or a farm home loan bond. So most of our funds are in the local government investment pool and then our U.S. bank account. So any questions?
At some point, one reminder, maybe you could send this, like the ESSER total and like what the running total would be great. And how much is left and what we anticipate.
Sure.
Just like, yeah, just, I know you've probably said it. I just kind of want to see it all in one place.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, Pat, thank you. And the illustrious superintendent is back for his report.
They're all making fun of me back here. I guarantee they have a stopwatch on this, and they're making bets right now. Who's buying pizza, depending on how long that's my team. I just want you to know. I never make fun of anyone. Anyway, with that said, just real quick, I will be tight. There is a number of things I wanted to share tonight. We can go as slow as we want, but I'll just rattle through like I normally do, and I'll stop for questions. And as always, I can follow up with this material and information through email and my regular superintendent updates. But just real quickly, the revenue forecast you just heard Pat talk about, just putting a couple numbers to it. Net general fund lottery revenues were up a combined $725 million. That actually hit, in fact, the revenues are so robust, it's written here, that they already surpassed the kicker threshold. So right now, personal kicker projected at $558 million, corporate kicker $250 million. And, you know, where we're at right now, just that early, it's just amazing, right? It's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. But the last piece I'll just throw a little bit of number on that is the state reserve accounts, education, stability fund, rainy day fund, and cash reserves all grew significantly and are currently projected to reach almost $4 billion during the 21-23 biennium. So that's equivalent to 16.5% of the general fund budget, which what's communicated and report. I'm not an expert, so these are what's being communicated. Is that just adds basically a strength in a position to weather significant economic downturns or downturns that might come. So anyway, just I guess it's good news. It's kind of like, what is the news? How is this happening? But it is right now, and that's where we are with numbers. So again, Pat already shared it with you, but I wanted to share as well. Sandy's got in front of you. This one I've already shared as well, but I just wanted to give a little bit of just a representation, because we talk about our enrollment and we talk about our enrollment declining. And you can see when back in 2003, as far as this goes back, you can see our enrollment was about 9,200. You can see we went up. We peaked about 2015? 14, 10-8. And we were full. But then you can see as we have started decline and going down and looking at it. So I know this information, actually this exact sheet I shared with you in a report, or Lori did, so you've seen it, but I just wanted to share and give an opportunity for our community as we're talking about our. Then the next step there is to think about our community, and I don't know how much I trust this data at this point, and what I mean is with COVID the way it is, But a sheet I have in front of me, I just wanted to add, is not only in 2015 was it, or 2014 was it 10,800. In 2014, we were at 82% of free and reduced lunch. This year, 2021, we're at 50% free and reduced lunch. So the change in demographics and needs around free and reduced lunch is quite significant, which adds to our understanding and belief of gentrification and who's being pushed out of our district and housing concerns, et cetera. Again, when I say I don't know the data, it's just, again, with COVID right now and who's in and who's out and how and asking, there's just a lot we still need to tighten up, but I just wanted to share that information with you, kind of give a visual representation. With that said, if we could go to the next slide deck, please, Sandy. Thank you so much. Yep, you're perfect. That's great. Thank you. Really, the order doesn't matter. I wanted to share a little bit. I had the opportunity to meet with ODE, and they shared some information related to COVID, where we're at, and kind of given a snapshot of where we're at. So a reminder from ODE, from the state of Oregon, is our North Star, safely and reliably hold school in person all year, right? They're really promoting that. We've heard that, we're trying that, we're working on it. And you can see that their belief is that children can learn better when they're in person, that ultimately we want to be in schools, and there's other avenues and reasons for it, right? Access to food, access to warm, safe drive, access to lunch for many of our students is a great opportunity that we have to provide for students. But so that's our snapshot first page. If you go to the next page, one of the things they shared is just as a concern and just to make sure we understood is winter is coming, and just acknowledging pandemic fatigue and current conditions. And one of the reasons they shared this, because they are, and we are as well, and many people are, is when do we stop? Can masks go away? We're back in school. Are we ready to kind of transition back? Do we still need all these safety rules? And you can see that what OD came with and shared with our superintendent's team was that we're not there yet. We're not there, and there's still a need to do many of these safety protocols, and you'll see that in a couple next slide. But first, that idea that, and I shared with this board team with us, when I started, or last spring, I was thinking this fall was going to look totally different, right? Maybe I was naive, but as summer came, as Delta hit, it was like, whoa, wait a minute, regroup, and I think we're all feeling that. And so they're sharing that we're not ready yet to move out of some of these safety protocols. And if you go to the next slide, please, Sandy. So with that said, we know, when you ask that question, or where did it change, we still know that the understanding we're getting and sharing is that our best way to limit the spread of this disease is through the safety protocols we have in place. And again, more slides, I'll show you why they're saying we aren't ready to change yet. But it says there, and advocating for, and I had the opportunity to sit on a panel last night and share with the county about, as a school district, hoping that families will consider vaccinations for specifically our 5 to 11-year-olds. And we had medical professionals on there talking about what the data and science says about that. But number one, getting vaccinated, wearing face coverings, the physical distancing, our cohorts, what we're doing, and then ultimately, tracking our students with seating charts, et cetera. Next slide, please. And then finally, just a visual. I think you've seen this, but if not, you can look at just kind of the idea of multiple layer protocols. So that idea of stopping these safety protocols, or even one of them, the concern is if you see all the way to the far left, it starts with symptom screening. It goes into training, cleaning, hand washing, airflow, and the more layers we put on, the idea is the less disease can get through, right? The less contagious, all the way down to that, the vaccination piece, which I'll share a little bit more information later. Next slide, please. So next slide. So just this is part of the update. Just again, well, aren't we ready? It's time. Can we start to relax some of these conditions? You can see community transmission by county. You can see Multnomah County high, the dark green still high. Next, Sandy, please. And this is the one that's really kind of tells the story. If you see fall, when we were at our peak, and thinking about where we were peak at this disease, and then spring, yes, we're declining and we're going the right direction. And part of this presentation and sharing, I just want to thank our families and our students and our teachers for following these safety protocols and ensuring, because it is dropping. But even though it's dropping, we're still higher than we ever were at the full extent before Delta. So you can see as it's dropping, there's still reasons for us to ensure that we have these safety protocols in place, is what the scientists are sharing with us. Next. Thank you, Sandy. So just a snapshot of an idea, quarantine protocols and changes. The current models and what we do with 10-day protocols, 14-day protocols and quarantine and where we have, what we're looking at is the idea of changing that. And OHA is working on basically shorter quarantine for schools based on the diagnostic testing that's coming, we hope, very shortly. And that's the next slide. And that is a test to stay, and that's the exciting, really getting into having a test to stay for our students so we know that, okay, you've been quarantined, but let's take this test and see, do you have it or not? So we aren't just waiting the 10 days or the 14 days. So they're talking about the possibility of that being here by the end of November. Obviously, being here is one step, really getting it in and using it, et cetera. But that's the excitement that a lot of people are very interested in, because once we have this available, our understanding is it will be a game changer, which next slide kind of talks a little bit. You could see that the idea was that at school tests, how it would play out, how we might be able to use them at home tests. They could be tested at home. Obviously, consent's always optional. But ultimately, the idea is that they don't have to go through a whole quarantine, because we can actually test and know and make the decisions to bring kids back to school. And the next slide is so with that said, one of the things that we're doing and partnering just to make sure our community knows is that we are putting together vaccination clinics, and there's a couple of them we're going to outline here. These are for anyone 5 and older, students and family members. The first one that's highlighted here starts on the 22nd with the first dose. It'll be at our high school South Campus where we're at tonight. So that's the first one, and this will be on our webpage, Facebook, post out or social media. And then the next one, as you scroll down, also been working very hard on two elementary schools that will be hosting specifically for their schools. We're trying to host 4 schools, just so it's a little smaller, a little more manageable, and then we'll do the big ones as well. So just wanted to give the board an idea and an update that we are partnering. You can see down there, if you scroll a little bit farther down, Sandy, with Kaiser medical teams and then MFS to kind of put these clinics together to support our community. The next, so this is something I alluded to a little earlier this evening, and specifically talked about a number of things in the ask about change and staff and where they're at. And one of the things we know, and I've updated the board through some of my email updates, and then I've had conversations with our board leadership as well, is this conversation from our staff and all staff, but this is specifically our licensed individuals, DDA members. They sent out a survey, and you can see here it went to all K-12 staff. There were 369 responses. That's about half of the FTE. You can see who responded, 44% elementary, middle school, high school. And really the idea of this survey had to do with how they're doing, how they're feeling. And I'm going to go through the questions here and give you some answers. But just in summary, it's not easy. It's not easy right now. And it's kind of interesting because not only is it not easy, people are on edge. People are feeling trauma. People are feeling this unease. But it's also hard to identify what it is. Haven't really sat down with anyone that says it's this is what it is, or it's that's what it is. So that's ultimately our union president shared this data with myself and Candy, and I believe a couple other were in the room as well, just to share. I mean, it was not pointing a finger. It was not a gotcha. It was this is what we're hearing, and we'd like to have a conversation. And we've talked about forming a planning team. We've talked about sitting down and having conversations. What can we do different? You know, what is it? What's the key to this? And how do we listen and how do we respond? So if we scroll down, we'll look at a few of these. You can see what is your current stress level related to work. And you'll see little to none, all the way up to extremely high at the right. And so you can see that 4 and 5 in the picture that's painting. If you go to the next slide, how do you feel about support from your site building administrators for your working conditions? You can see the left is the supported, and then over is the completely supported, or 3 to the middle or over. So just some feedback there on how staff are feeling around support. Next. How do you support from the DDA, so the David Douglas Education Association, just a little bit more about support. Next. And then this is really the information I wanted to share and get into, because what is contributing to your stress level at work? And a couple things I probably should have said. First and foremost, I had permission to share this. I did ask, is it okay if I share this report that they shared with us? And the answer is yes. And two is, this isn't the whole survey. I just gave you a few slides. I will share the whole thing, but for the purposes tonight, I'm just giving you a snapshot. But you can see the number one thing there, 78% lack of substitute availability, and the reality of what that's doing and feels like in buildings every single day. And it is something that I have positive news to report, and I'll probably have Candy come up and join me in a few minutes here, but a plan there at least. But then if you go down, feeling the pressure to help students catch up, the expectation that school resumes as normal, there's that big piece there. Safety concerns, providing continuity of instructions for quarantine students, and then the list goes on and on. But I did want to make the board aware of this and let you know that we're going to be interacting with DDA leadership and having conversations. How can we respond to this? What are some things that we can do? What can we control? What can't we control? And how do we help alleviate this? I also want to share that, again, I don't know if it's a phenomena. I don't know if it's just coming back, stamina. I don't know if it's where we're at. I don't know if it feels like we started too soon, kind of 0 to 60. I think all those pieces, even though we did staggered start, we tried to do some things. But if you think about all of the different release we did last year, this year it's kind of like all back on from ODE, all our Division 22 standards, all of our, so I don't have an answer for you, and I'm not pointing this out because it's broken, but I am pointing it out because there's a feeling in our buildings and with our staff. They can feel that. I can feel that. We can feel it, and I think it's on us as leaders to have a conversation and connect to make sure we're listening and ultimately make sure we're serving kids well. I'll also share that that we're not the only district. That basically, in fact, every district did a survey like this, is my understanding. PAT's, I believe, is already out. Portland's was out a few weeks ago. I think, I know all our neighboring districts. And the same type of feeling is out there, and conversation and communication. So I don't have an answer yet, but I did want our board to know that this conversation is taking place, and we'll be including you in that conversation. I did want to share, because there are some things that we can control, some things we can't control, but the one thing we can control is that lack of substitutes, and really developing a program and trying to think outside the box and do things differently. And we have some things teed up, and hopefully after Thanksgiving break, and I don't know, Candy, are you comfortable sharing? I can too, but.
All right, thank you. Yes, so I'll just speak to 3 really specific things we're doing currently to increase our substitute pool. And one of those is we're working with the company that we contract with to hire substitutes. And what we're trying to do is designate right now at elementary 1 substitute per building that they just report there every day, no matter what. So they're kind of hours, so we wouldn't be competing with other districts. And then if we don't need them at that building, which is pretty unlikely because every day there's a substitute needed in every building. But if there's a chance that they don't need them that day, we would then put them in another building to fill an unfilled spot. On any given day, we have from 1 to 9 unfilled positions in each building. And over the month of October, I think we had at the very low, we had only a 29% fill rate in one of our elementary buildings. And that's really, really rough. That is taxing not only on the principal, but also the other teachers that are not assigned to a specific classroom, and so they have to fill in, but then they can't do their regular job. So, and then ultimately it impacts our students. So that's the low. The high, we've been up to 85% fill rate in certain buildings. So it's definitely a big issue, but we're hoping that we'll have those designated subs real soon. They're working on it right now, but again, trying to find them to designate them is also difficult. We have reached out to our retired teachers. And I know we've lost some just this year because they're a little bit nervous about getting into buildings with COVID. But we did reach out to them just to let them know they're very much needed, and to let them know that we would pay them at a higher rate. And the higher rate is, there's a difference in terms of a daily rate versus a long-term substitute rate, and we would pay them at that long-term substitute rate. And for some, that might be of interest to them. And then lastly, which is, I will say, the most promising aspect here, is our licensing board, Teacher Standards and Practices Commission, TSPC. This year, they issued a temporary ruling where we could hire individuals to substitute, and we would put them on an emergency substitute license just for this year, and they do not have to have a 4-year degree. And there's certain requirements now, and they've now lifted those requirements. So what we've done is reached out to our building principals to say, you have classified employees in your building that are pretty amazing with kids. And there are some that definitely can take on the role of an entire classroom for a day following some substitute plans. So we've asked for recommendations from our principals, and right now we have, I think we're up to about 32 district-wide. And so we're working with those individuals on getting them an emergency substitute license, and then when we use them in any given building, that day they would actually make considerably more for that day than they normally would in the role that they currently have. So those are just 3 specific things, but we're always open to trying just about anything right now. So
Thank you, Candy. So I believe that's the last slide on that. Yeah, thank you, Sandy, for keeping me. So that's really it. Just kind of an update on a few different items that are going to be coming forward. There's going to be more information around vaccination, around clinics, around how this disease progresses, how it changes from a pandemic to an endemic, what that looks like, and how we stay in front of that and communicate with our staff, and ultimately make safety a priority. Staff is listening and working together to help and support, and making sure that we're providing, just like we discussed earlier about the work in the classrooms, our responsibility is to create the conditions and support so our teachers and staff can be successful. And there's definitely right now, there's a vibe out there that we're trying to get in front of and have communication around. What is it? What will be helpful? What does that look like? And the big thing is just making sure we're at the table having that conversation. So I have one more thing, but I'm going to stop there. Make sure there's no specific questions or anything you want me to follow up on that superintendent's report. And it can be in an email too, of course, or a text or a phone call. But if not, then the last thing, and this is just a reminder, Lori sent out NSBA National Conference. If anyone's interested, I believe one of our board members did respond to her as an interest, which is great. We will kind of walk through, but if anyone else is interested or considering it, please let Lori know. I believe in December is kind of the first cutoff on saving money. So it's, first when you book it, it's cheaper than if you book it the day. So if there is an interest, again, I think, we have some new members too, but there's others that have been. There's others that know it is. I believe it's informative. It is time away. I believe it's in San Diego this year. So anyway, if anyone's interested, please get back to Lori so she can start that process of organizing. And it's kind of a big thing, believe it or not. So, yes, Aaron.
I just wanted to throw a shout out to our teachers. I've been working throughout the pandemic, in a residential community, and I know how stressful it is being around people that you can't guarantee that they don't have COVID, and you're not going to get COVID, and you can take all the safety precautions in the world, but it's still stressful. And so I really appreciate that our teachers are suiting up and showing up, and our all the other staff in our schools that are showing up every day for our kids. It's just amazing, and I know it's terrifying, and I just a reflection of all that stress that they're feeling, and then they're still doing the do. So I just wanted to I don't want to speed bump that. I really wanted to just say, you know, to anybody that's listening, just thank you. 'Cause that's really amazing to me. And all of you too, you know. Thanks, Ken.
Anyone else? Donna?
This is a question that goes back to when we were talking about the equity plan and the guiding principles. Are those posted anywhere in the buildings? Like those 4 focus areas, are they posted? Yeah.
So we haven't, so what I'm hearing here is no, probably yes. I mean, I have seen them in certain buildings, but we haven't like made our own district posters and got them out to everyone yet. But yeah, so the answer is no. I mean, specifically. The equity lens, yeah, we did create the equity lens poster and got that out into all of our schools, but those priorities are not on a kind of formalized district poster yet.
I think they're great focuses, and this connects again to what Espen was saying about people knowing about them. Is just, that was a thought that came to my mind, is having them visible in our buildings tells our parents, our community, our students, everybody, keeps it in front of us, and also holds us accountable publicly.
Yeah, I love the idea. And yeah, I'd love to be able to say, yeah, that was, we had a plan for next week, but I don't know that we did. So now we do. So thank you. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Well said. It's probably the German culture in me, but a board that is functional ends on time. We're adjourned.